forward. Most people think communication is a given. Phones work, power is there, networks route connections. Until SHTF or the grid goes down. Then the brutal reality shows up and there is nothing you can do about it if you're not prepared. I've known Julian, aka Crazy White Boy, since the beginning of our time in the Marine Corps. Long before YouTube, before online platforms, before preparedness was fashionable, he was already thinking about what happens when systems fail. Not if the zombies would come, but when the zombies would come. His experience didn't come from theory or the internet. It goes back to the late 1980s and early 1990s, operating in the deserts of Arizona, Mexico, and Southern California, where the desert was our playground and guns and radios were our toys. Most of it was LOS, but that's what worked in the high deserts. Every free moment we had was spent learning how to survive in what looked like a lifeless wasteland, except for prairie dogs and sidewinders. Distance, heat, terrain, and isolation strip away all the BS, and you learn something important. Your closest buddy is often just a radio away. Make it work, or deal with the consequences. In the mid-90s, Julian and I parted ways. He went to Europe, Africa, the Sandbox, and who knows where else, putting his communication skills to work in broadcasting. At the time, I honestly thought it was a waste. Then years later, he showed back up, and I realized he hadn't changed. He was still thinking in survival terms. The difference was the lens. Back in the day, it was the narrow zombie apocalypse mindset. Later, it was more like the end of the world as we know it, sipping margaritas, but still taking the core problem seriously. That core problem never changed. Even when we were still young and active in the survival community, we understood something early that most people still miss today. When the grid goes down, communications stop being an option. Commo skills and equipment become a requirement. No signal, no coordination, bad outcomes. Later, when Julian became known online as Survival Tech Nord, I pushed him to share what he knew. Not because it was interesting, I didn't agree with most of it in the beginning, but because it was necessary to look at this through a strategic lens. His approach was different. He never chased gear for its own sake. He focused on outcomes. He understood that radios are just tools, and without strategy, methods, and procedures, even good equipment turns into noise. Grid-down emergency communications matters because it confronts a hard truth most people avoid. Buying a Baofeng is easy. Building a real communications network strategy for your group is not. People assume capability without discipline. They assume gear will save them. It won't. Julian starts where most people should start: strategy first, then methods, then procedures that still work when we're stressed, confused, and failure is already in play. This book is not about becoming a radio expert. It is about keeping people connected when it actually counts. Families, groups, real situations. The kind where mistakes compound and time is already working against you. What you get here is not a checklist, it is a way of thinking. A framework for commo that has to function when things are already going wrong. When SHTF stops being a concept and becomes the day you are living through, take it seriously. Test it, break it, fix it, do the work. Preface. This book is not another guide to buying radios, memorizing frequency charts, or programming a budget handheld. It is about understanding how communication actually works when the grid goes down, and why most people fail at it even when they own the right gear. In a real emergency, our communication success or failure won't come from equipment alone. It comes from strategy, the methods we use to execute that strategy, and the procedures that keep everything working when stress, confusion, and failure show up. Radios are only tools. Without a plan, discipline, and a shared framework, those tools quickly turn into noise. Grid down emergency communications. How to stay connected. When grid power fails is written for families, groups, and preparedness-minded individuals who want to maintain contact when conventional systems stop working. Whether the disruption is caused by a natural disaster, cyber attack, long-term power outage, civil unrest, or widespread infrastructure failure, the problem is always the same. How do you keep information moving when power, networks, and assumptions collapse? This book approaches emergency communications as a system, not a shopping list. You will learn how to think in layers, how to match tools to distance and terrain, and how to design communications that continue functioning as conditions degrade. Strategy comes first. Methods follow. Procedures make it repeatable. Inside, you'll learn how to develop a communications plan built on strategy, methods, and procedures rather than brand names and wattage. Choose appropriate radio services such as CB, FRS, PMR, GMRS, amateur radio, and satellite systems based on mission requirements, not hype. Build off-grid communication systems that support local, regional, and long-distance reach. Apply practical techniques such as NVIS for reliable regional coverage when line of sight fails. Expand capability with data and messaging modes such as WinLink JS8 Call or VAR AC for both real-time and asynchronous communication. Understand the real limits of security and apply group-level strategies without false confidence. Build and deploy radio go kits that support rapid movement, redundancy, and sustained operation. Establish procedures and discipline that allow groups to function under stress, not just individuals with radios. This is not a definitive survival communications Bible, and it is not meant to replace hands-on experience. Think of it as a framework you can adapt to your own reality, your terrain, your distances, and your group. The concepts here are designed to scale from a single family to a dispersed group operating across multiple communication ranges. To get the most from this book, pair what you read with practice, training, and honest testing. Assumptions fail under pressure. Methods that work on paper must work in the field. Strategy only matters if it survives contact with reality. Your journey toward resilient, adaptable communication starts here. All right, 73 guys. Julian, OH8 STN. Scenario: no service. It is often difficult to grasp the danger of losing the ability to reach the people you trust when the grid goes down. Mobile phones, email, and the internet have become everyday lifelines. But if those tools vanish without warning, how will you contact your family or friends, and how will those who depend on you reach you? The following scenario places you in the experience of a man named Johnny. He finds himself in the middle of a developing disaster that brings casualties and structural damage to his community, while also cutting off his ability to call for help. Let's follow along with Johnny's story. The glowing phone screen cast a pale light on Johnny's face as he tapped the call button again and again. Nothing. The no service message in the corner of the screen mocked him, as each failed attempt deepened his sense of isolation. Nearby, the world was in chaos, with distant sirens, cries for help, and an indescribable stench filling the air. Johnny paced in tight circles, his breath shallow and quick. The device in his hand had once been a lifeline to his world, but now it felt like a useless piece of plastic, aluminum, and glass. He tried his phone again, dialing a different number. Mom, Dad, his buddy Alex. Each failed attempt amplified his panic. What if something had happened? What if his friends and family were trapped, injured, or worse? Come on, Johnny whispered, the words barely audible over the trembling in his voice. A sinking realization settled in. The network was not coming back anytime soon. The mobile towers that once connected him to loved ones were silent and dark. Johnny looked up at the sky, feeling an unsettling stillness. For the first time in his life, he was completely cut off from his people. Emergency communication, relief versus preparedness. In any emergency, communication becomes one of the most critical lifelines for survival, coordination, and information sharing. However, it is essential to distinguish between two different categories of emergency communication: disaster relief communications and survival, or preparedness communications. While both aim to maintain vital connections, their goals and methods are not the same. Disaster relief communications focus on reconnecting affected communities with the outside world. The primary objective is to bring aid and support into a disaster zone by coordinating with government agencies, NGOs, and larger organizations. These efforts often rely on centralized systems such as satellite phones, commercial networks, and other infrastructure-dependent solutions to request resources, coordinate responders, distribute aid, and track an evolving situation. Survival or preparedness communications prioritize self-reliance. The focus is maintaining secure, reliable contact with family, friends, and trusted networks when conventional infrastructure is unavailable or unreliable. That means building communication capability that can function without depending on the power grid, cell towers, the internet, or outside organizations. When the goal is continuity under worst-case conditions, independence matters. This chapter explores practical communication options for grid-down conditions and how each fits into a layered plan. Short-range tools such as FRS, GMRS, and PMR 446 are excellent for local coordination inside a neighborhood, camp, or small operating area. CB can be useful for local coordination and vehicle-to-vehicle work when paired with a decent antenna, especially with SSB. Amateur radio expands capability further. VHF and UHF can cover local and area communications, and HF can provide regional and long-distance reach when infrastructure is gone. Satellite-based tools such as Starlink can augment these methods by restoring internet connectivity for messaging, VoIP calls, and situational awareness when ground-based networks are degraded or offline. The point is not that one option is best. The point is knowing what each layer is designed to do and selecting the tool that reliably completes the contact for the mission. When the grid goes down, your ability to communicate often becomes your lifeline. Whether you are coordinating with family, requesting help, or staying informed about the broader situation, the ability to pass messages under real-world conditions matters. In many cases, the most valuable contacts are not strangers. They are the people you already trust who can provide advice, supplies, or direct support. That is why pre-established communication plans and tested methods matter more than owning a radio. Alongside traditional off-grid options such as ham radio, CB, GMRS, FRS, or PMR 446, satellite internet systems such as SpaceX Starlink are becoming useful tools in preparedness planning. Starlink can provide internet connectivity during extended disruptions, enabling real-time data sharing, messaging platforms, and voice calls using VoIP even when local infrastructure is compromised. It can also act as a bridge for certain workflows that benefit from internet access when you have the power budget and a clear view of the sky. Starlink can also support radio email workflows. WinLink is a radio email system that allows licensed amateur operators to send and receive messages using HF and other radio links, including in situations where local services have failed. In some configurations, a functioning internet link can be used to reach unaffected regions and extend message delivery options. This hybrid approach will be covered later in the book, where we can discuss how and when it makes sense. and how to keep it from becoming a single point of failure. For now, the foundation is preparedness communication itself. Building off-grid radio capability that can operate autonomously and choosing communication layers based on what works when conditions get ugly. As the book progresses, we will return to Starlink and WinLink in more detail and show how they can complement other systems as part of a resilient long-duration communications plan. Choosing the right communication tool for the job. In a grid-down scenario, the right tool depends on distance, terrain, and what is actually working that day. VHF and UHF line-of-sight systems are excellent for close-range coordination inside a neighborhood, a work area, or a movement corridor. HF using the ionosphere gives you reach beyond the horizon and keeps working when local infrastructure fails. When you combine these layers, you get a communications plan that can adapt instead of collapse. Later in this book, we will also cover how Starlink can complement these traditional layers by providing satellite internet for broader communications needs, bridging the gap between local radio coordination and global connectivity. HF communication, high frequency. HF operates in the 3 to 30 MHz range and is best known for long-distance communication. Unlike VHF and UHF, HF can reach beyond the horizon because the signal can reflect off the ionosphere. This is often called skip or skywave propagation, and it can allow contacts across hundreds, thousands, or even more miles or kilometers without repeaters, towers, or internet. Ionospheric reflection is not magic, and it is not guaranteed. It changes with solar activity, time of day, season, and the condition of the ionosphere. The skill is knowing which band to use, when to use it, and how to build an antenna system that can actually radiate efficiently. HF and NVIS communication, near vertical incidence skywave. HF is not only for long-distance contacts. With NVIS, you can use HF for local to regional coverage, typically 30 to 300 miles, 48 to 480 kilometers. Instead of launching energy at a low angle for distance, NVIS radiates most of the signal nearly straight up, so it reflects back down across a broad regional footprint. This is the layer that keeps groups connected when line-of-sight radios hit the horizon and repeaters are not available. Why NVIS matters in the real world. Terrain that crushes VHF and UHF, such as forests, hills, and valleys, often has less impact on NVIS comms. NVIS fills the gap between local handheld comms and true long-range HF. NVIS works best on the lower HF bands, and band choice depends on time of day. For example, night 160 meters, 80 meters, and 60 meters are often strong NVIS choices. Day, 60 meters and 40 meters are common NVIS choices for stable regional coverage. NVIS is not compatible with 27 MHz CB in any practical sense. The 11-meter band does not behave like the lower HF bands used for reliable NVIS coverage. Practical note, an NVIS station is built around an efficient low horizontal antenna, often a dipole or inverted V configured for high-angle radiation. If the antenna is configured incorrectly, NVIS performance will suffer. VHF and UHF communication. Very high frequency / ultra high frequency. VHF 30 to 300 MHz and UHF 300 MHz to 3 GHz are primarily line-of-sight systems. The signal travels in a fairly straight path from transmitter to receiver, and obstacles such as buildings, hills, and dense forest can block or degrade it. Antenna height often matters more than power. VHF is commonly used for outdoor and mobile work where a clear path exists. It can perform very well across open areas, water, and rolling terrain, but it struggles when the path is blocked. UHF is widely used in urban and indoor environments because it tends to penetrate buildings better than VHF. The trade-off is that in open terrain, UHF often does not carry as far as VHF for the same antenna height and power. Where common services fit, FRS, GMRS, and PMR446 are UHF services designed for local line-of-sight coordination. Amateur VHF and UHF covers both local simplex and repeater-based coverage when infrastructure is available. Range limitations and realistic expectations. Line-of-sight range is limited by terrain, obstructions, and the horizon. Handheld to handheld can be a few miles, a few kilometers in open terrain, and far less in dense forest or built-up areas. Repeaters can extend range dramatically, but they are still infrastructure. In a grid-down plan, treat repeaters as a bonus, not a dependency. A little more on communications range. HF long distance. You maximize range by using an efficient antenna, choosing the right band for the target distance, and operating at the right time of day. Antenna height and a clean installation matter, especially for low noise and efficient radiation. HF NVIS. You maximize NVIS performance with a properly configured low horizontal antenna designed for high-angle radiation. Correct height above ground is part of the system, and it directly affects losses and the radiation pattern. VHF and UHF. You maximize line-of-sight performance with antenna height, good placement, and efficient antennas. Directional antennas, such as a Yagi, can increase effective range by concentrating energy toward the target and rejecting interference from other directions. If you have off-grid power and your group controls its own repeater, that can extend coverage, but it should not be treated as guaranteed. Range versus power and antenna efficiency. More power can help, but power alone is not the answer. Antenna efficiency and antenna gain often deliver bigger improvements than cranking up watts, especially when battery life matters. Antenna gain basics. Directional antennas, example Yagi, focus energy in one direction. They are ideal when you know where the other station is and you need maximum reach in that direction. Omnidirectional antennas radiate in all directions. They are useful when you need broad local coverage or you do not know where the other station is located. Higher gain antennas improve effective range and reliability by concentrating more of your transmit energy where it is useful and by capturing more of the other station's signal on receive. That often lets you run less power for the same result, which matters when you are on batteries. Antenna and battery efficiency. In grid-down work, efficiency is a survival issue. A more efficient antenna can extend range without draining your batteries faster by using higher power. Increasing power into a poor antenna wastes energy, generates heat, and often produces little real improvement. Primary communication tools. In a grid-down scenario, your tools should match distance and the reality of the environment, FRS, GMRS, PMR446. Simple handheld radios on preset channels ideal for local coordination inside a neighborhood, property, camp, or work area. They are easy to teach and fast to deploy. CB radio, 27 MHz, a license-free option commonly used for local vehicle-to-vehicle communications, rural coordination, and roadside monitoring. With a decent antenna, CB can be useful locally, but it is not a reliable regional system. Amateur radio. Amateur VHF and UHF provides flexible local and area communications with better antenna options and higher performance. Amateur HF provides regional and long-distance communications without relying on local towers, especially when configured for NVIS. Shortwave receiver, not for two-way comms, but invaluable for receiving information when local networks are silent. Satellite tools. When they work and you can power them, satellite systems can provide a powerful support layer for messaging, voice, and data. They are not autonomous in the same way radio is, but they can add capability when used deliberately. A closer look at CB radio. CB is popular because it is accessible and license-free. It is common among truckers and off-roaders, and it can be useful for local coordination. Typical range. With common mobile antennas and ground wave conditions, practical range is often about 1 to 5 miles, 1.6 to 8 kilometers, depending on terrain and antenna setup. Longer contacts can happen when conditions favor ionospheric skip, but those contacts are unpredictable and not a planning foundation. CB with SSB, single sideband. SSB is more efficient than AM and can improve readability and effective range for the same power. It can also help you get through noise and congestion more effectively. The trade-off is that performance still depends on conditions and consistency drops as you push beyond normal ground wave range. Importance of redundancy. In a true emergency, relying on one method is a mistake. Gear fails, batteries die, antennas break, and conditions change. Some tools are excellent locally, but useless beyond the horizon. Other tools are excellent regionally, but require more setup and skill. Redundancy is how you keep moving when the first plan stops working. Redundancy has 3 layers: methods, equipment, and people. A backup radio is useless if nobody knows how to run it. Moreover, a great operator is still a single point of failure if the only antenna feed line you have is broken, or the only charging cable for our radio is lost. The bottom line here is redundancy must be thought about in terms of diminished capability. For fixed locations, redundancy is easier. You can store spares, tools, and backup systems in one place, and you can afford heavier items like extra feed line, a second antenna, larger batteries, and repair supplies. When we're primarily operating mobile or trying to relocate, redundancy must be ruthless. Weight and volume matter, so you prioritize the highest failure items and the parts that restore capability fastest. Redundancy can also be shared or distributed across the group. If the group is moving, redundancy does not have to be carried by one person. It can be distributed so the comm system survives even if someone gets separated, injured, or loses a pack. Standardize the common failure points so everyone can support the same system. Use the same connector types where possible. Use the same battery connectors and charging approach. Use the same band plan, channel plan, and message format. Distribute small, high-value spares across multiple members. Fuses, power leads, and a known good spare charging cable. Spare antenna coax and coax jumpers. Antenna wire, paracord, a few tent stakes, and a compact throw line. Tape, zip ties, a few connectors, and basic hand tools. A spare handheld mic or earbud plus one spare battery if the platform supports it. Distribute capability, not just parts. One person carries the spare wire antenna kit. Another carries the Yagi or the critical mast hardware. Another carries the spare power distribution and fuse kit. Another carries the logging card, contact plan, and printed quick reference. The goal: you do not need duplication of everything, you need continuity of function. When something breaks, the group should be able to restore comms quickly, shift to the next layer, and keep the plan moving forward. A resilient plan stacks layers. Local line of sight for immediate coordination. HF, especially NVIS for regional continuity. Then optional support layers such as satellite internet when they are available and worth the power cost. The bigger picture. In a world where communication is instant and global, it is difficult to imagine life without mobile networks, the internet, or reliable power even during a disaster. The The reality is that these conveniences are not robust. They can disappear without warning during a natural disaster, a man-made event, or a long-term grid failure. Our need for reliable communication does not disappear when these systems go down. It becomes even more critical. Families and groups must prepare for those moments when traditional methods of communications fail. Whether facing a short outage from a storm, a prolonged grid-down scenario, or the need to work around a restricted or unreliable internet, the consequences of isolation can be severe. Being able to reach loved ones, access accurate information, or stay connected with your community can mean the difference between safety and disaster. You won't always understand. From this point forward, you might not understand every phrase or technical term. Do not worry about that now. As we move through the chapters, you will develop a clear understanding of the radio communication terms and concepts. Be patient and keep reading. Why emergency communications matter. From a survival and preparedness perspective, two-way communication involves both sending and receiving information. That information can be carried by voice, like a telephone call, or by text, such as email, WhatsApp, or a simple message from your phone. In this book, these methods are explored in both real-time and asynchronous forms, meaning they can be read in real time or later on as conditions allow. It may sound complex, but these strategies provide adaptability in a wide range of scenarios. Whether you are coordinating an immediate response or sharing critical updates when timing is less urgent. Key aspects. Voice communications, real-time interaction for immediate exchange of information, critical for coordination, verification, and emergencies, where tone and urgency matter. Messaging, real-time and asynchronous. Text-based communication that can be delivered instantly or stored and accessed later. Ensuring connectivity even when people are not available at the same moment or when poor conditions create delays. When traditional infrastructure fails, methodology in grid-down emergency communications refers to the structured approach used to achieve reliable, adaptable, and effective communication. It includes the technical, tactical, and procedural strategies needed to select and integrate tools like voice and messaging systems to meet specific needs and conditions during a crisis. Many of us began with license-free radios for local voice communication. Over time, some transitioned to amateur radio, which enables more advanced methods such as voice over greater distances, data modes for keyboard-to-keyboard chats, and messaging through mesh networks. These tools operate independently of fragile infrastructure like cell networks. Combined, voice, data, and messaging provide reliable and adaptable communication solutions for grid-down emergencies and disasters. Voice communication. Voice communication is the foundation of over-the-air communication offering immediate, real-time interaction. Its intuitive nature makes it ideal for quick decision-making, coordination, and sharing urgent updates. Voice communication excels in scenarios such as radio-to-radio or peer repeater use. For localized communication, voice over VHF or UHF radios provides fast, direct contact within line of sight or through repeaters that extend range. Team coordination. Whether managing a small team in the field or directing a vehicle convoy, voice communication provides clarity and immediacy. Situational awareness. In dynamic situations, tone and inflection convey urgency and context, which are critical for safety. However, voice communication is limited to real-time interactions and requires all parties to be listening at the moment of transmission. It also lacks the ability to relay detailed information asynchronously or efficiently over long distances without additional human interaction by third parties. Messaging. Messaging over the air complements voice communication by offering capabilities that voice alone cannot achieve. Messaging systems can operate in real time or asynchronously, making them highly versatile for grid-down scenarios. The key advantages of messaging include asynchronous communication. Unlike voice, messaging allows users to send and receive information even when both parties are not available at the same time. Messages can be stored and forwarded through intermediary stations, ensuring delivery despite delays. Extended range and efficiency. Data modes like JS8 call, VAR-AC, and WinLink operate on narrow bandwidths, allowing long-distance communication with minimal power. These modes are especially valuable in poor propagation conditions where voice, because of its wider bandwidth, may struggle. Detail-oriented communication. Messaging is ideal for sharing precise information, such as coordinates, supply inventories, or situation reports, without the risk of misinterpretation. Redundancy. By using data modes on HF bands, messaging systems can bypass local obstructions and reach far beyond the capabilities of VHF or UHF voice radios. Why both methodologies are essential. Voice and messaging are not competing methods. They are complementary tools that serve distinct purposes in a comprehensive grid-down communication strategy. Voice provides immediacy and simplicity, making it the go-to for real-time coordination and critical updates. Messaging offers efficiency, reliability over long distances, and the ability to communicate asynchronously. Integrating both methodologies into your emergency communication plan ensures adaptability in a wide range of scenarios. Whether coordinating with local team members or reaching distant family, the combination of voice and messaging equips you to stay connected, informed, and prepared. The reality of grid dependence. Imagine a scenario where the power grid has collapsed due to a prolonged natural disaster or a man-made event with no clear timeline for restoration. Without electricity, cell towers fail, and the internet becomes inaccessible. Emergency services may be overwhelmed or slow to respond, and relying on them could leave you isolated and uninformed at critical moments. So what do we do? We have already seen countless examples: hurricanes in the southeastern United States, wildfires in the West, and regional conflicts such as the war in Ukraine have all left people without access to essential communication services and power, forcing them to scramble for alternatives. Relying solely on centralized systems is a gamble none of us can afford to take. Even a minor emergency, such as being separated from family members during an evacuation, can become critical. If the distances are not too great, a simple two-way radio might allow you to coordinate and reunite, or it might not. That is why comprehensive, self-reliant communication methods are essential. When the grid goes down, the ability to reach loved ones, access accurate information, and stay connected with your community should not depend on systems outside your control. Independent, off-grid solutions provide the autonomy to continue communicating regardless of what happens to the grid. Misconceptions. One of the biggest challenges in emergency communications and survival radio is overcoming common misunderstandings. A common misconception is that a single radio or communication system can meet every need. In reality, that never happens. You might see someone on YouTube or in a forum recommending a popular device like a Baofeng type radio as the ultimate solution. The truth is far more nuanced. Different scenarios, different tools. A two-way radio that works well for short-range communication in an urban environment may be unsuitable for long-distance rural communication. Trade-offs exist. No radio system is perfect. Each type of radio and the band it operates on has unique advantages and disadvantages. Understanding these trade-offs is critical to creating a reliable communication strategy for yourself. We have explored the fundamentals of why emergency communication matters and the pitfalls of relying on fragile systems. But what happens when the challenge is not only losing service, but also being physically cut off from the people who matter most? Recap of lessons learned. This chapter introduced the reality of losing modern communications and the impact it can have during a disaster. Johnny's experience shows how quickly isolation, fear, and uncertainty can take hold when the systems we depend on fail without warning. We learned that mobile phones, internet access, and centralized networks are fragile conveniences rather than guaranteed lifelines. When they disappear, the need for independent, reliable communication becomes critical. We also explored the foundations of emergency communication, including the difference between voice and messaging, the value of asynchronous communication, and why both methods are essential in a grid-down environment. Finally, we dispelled the idea that one tool can meet every need. Different scenarios require different solutions, and understanding these distinctions is the first step in building a resilient communication plan. This chapter sets the stage for what comes next. Now that we understand the problem, the next chapters will show how to solve it.